Vasco da Gama. Chapter 1. The Boy from Signs. My name is Vasco da Gama. I was born in the 1460s in a small town called Signs, Portugal. It's a place kissed by the sun, where the big blue sea stretches out forever. Every morning, I woke up to the smell of salty air and the sound of crashing waves. My father, Estevao, was an important man. He worked for the King of Portugal and helped keep our town safe. My mother was kind and strong. She took care of me and my brother, Paulo, making sure we were always fed and loved. Our favorite place to play was the beach. The sand was warm and soft between our toes. We built sandcastles taller than us, with moats and drawbridges to keep out imaginary enemies. The waves rushed in and out, sometimes tickling our feet, sometimes trying to knock us over. We chased the waves with all our might, laughing as they foamed and bubbled around us. One sunny afternoon, while digging in the sand, I saw something amazing. Big ships with tall, white sails appeared on the horizon. They looked like giant birds with wings outstretched, gliding gracefully on the water. Men shouted commands, ropes pulled tight, and the ships moved steadily across the waves. Curiosity filled me like the ocean breeze. I ran to my father, who was inspecting the harbor that day. "Where are those ships going?" I asked, pointing excitedly. He smiled warmly and ruffled my hair. "Those ships, Vasco," he said, "explore the world. They sail to new lands, meet new people, and bring back amazing things." His words sparked a fire in my heart. From that day on, the sea wasn't just a place to play. It became a place of mystery and adventure. I dreamed of sailing on those big ships, feeling the wind in my hair and the spray of the sea on my face. I wanted to see new lands with different colors, people with different languages, and discover things no one in Signs had ever seen before. As I grew older, my fascination with the sea only grew stronger. I spent hours listening to stories from sailors who had traveled far and wide. They spoke of strange lands with towering mountains that touched the clouds, vast deserts that stretched as far as the eye could see, and thick jungles filled with exotic animals. Their tales fueled my desire for adventure. I knew I wouldn't be content staying in Signs forever, no matter how much I loved it. The call of the sea was too strong to ignore. I wanted to be an explorer, just like the men on those magnificent ships. So, I started learning everything I could about the sea. I studied the stars, which sailors used to navigate at night. I learned how to read maps, which showed the different lands and oceans of the world. I even practiced using a compass, a tool that helped sailors find their way even when they couldn't see the stars. The sea was becoming my classroom and the wind my teacher. With every passing day, I felt myself getting closer to my dream of exploring the vast unknown. Little did I know, the sea would take me on a journey far beyond anything I could have ever imagined. Chapter 2. The King's Mission. Years rolled by like the waves on the shore. Portugal became a busy place, filled with people buzzing about something called spices. These were special things from faraway lands that made food taste amazing. They came in all sorts of colors: black pepper, like tiny dark balls, golden cinnamon that smelled sweet, and ginger, a bumpy root that gave food a spicy kick. Everyone wanted these spices, but getting them was a big problem. They came from a land called India, far to the east. The only way to get them was by traveling for months on camel caravans across hot deserts, or by taking long and dangerous journeys by ship. The problem with the ship route was that nobody had found a good way to sail all the way around Africa to get to India. Africa was a giant continent that stuck out far into the ocean, blocking the way. Sailors who tried to go south along the African coast often got stuck in bad weather, rough seas, and unknown dangers. One day, a big change came to my life. The King of Portugal, King Manuel, a powerful man with a shiny crown, decided it was time to find a better way to India. He wanted a brave sailor to lead an expedition, a big trip, to explore the African coast and find a sea route to India. The news spread like wildfire through Portugal. Everyone wanted to be part of this exciting adventure. But the king needed someone special, someone who knew the sea, wasn't afraid of danger, and wouldn't give up easily. Guess who he chose? You guessed it, me, Vasco da Gama. When the news reached me, I couldn't believe my ears. My heart thumped like a drum in my chest. This was the moment I had been waiting for all my life. To explore the world, sail to unknown lands, and find a new way to India. It was a dream come true. I quickly traveled to Lisbon, the capital city of Portugal, to meet the king. The king's palace was huge and grand, with tall towers and sparkling windows. When I entered the throne room, King Manuel was sitting on a big, golden chair, wearing a fancy robe. He looked important and wise. I knelt before him and bowed my head. "Your Majesty," I said, my voice trembling a little with excitement, "I am honored that you have chosen me for this mission. I will do everything in my power to find a sea route to India." The king smiled, a kind crinkle forming around his eyes. "I have faith in you, Vasco," he said. "You are a brave and skilled sailor. I know you can do this." He explained the mission in more detail. He wanted me to lead a fleet of ships, a group of ships sailing together, down the coast of Africa, find a way around the continent, and reach India. It was a dangerous journey, but the rewards could be great. If I succeeded, Portugal would be the first country to find a sea route to India, and we would have a steady supply of spices to make our food delicious and our pockets full. The king provided me with everything I needed for the journey. We built 3 strong ships, perfect for navigating the rough seas. My ship, the one I would captain, was named the São Gabriel. We stocked the ships with plenty of food and water, enough to last for months. We also packed weapons, swords, cannons, and shields to protect ourselves from any dangers we might encounter along the way. Finding a crew was easy. Many brave sailors, hungry for adventure and a chance to be part of history, volunteered to join me. They were a mix of young and old, experienced and new, but all shared the same spirit of exploration and courage. Finally, the big day arrived. It was 1497, and the sun shone brightly as we set sail from Lisbon harbor. The cheering crowds on the shore faded away as we left the familiar coast behind. The vast blue ocean stretched out before us, full of unknown possibilities. My heart pounded with excitement and a little bit of fear. This was the beginning of a journey that would change my life forever. We were on a quest for spices, for adventure, and for a place in history. Little did I know, the journey to India would be long, filled with challenges, and would test my courage and leadership in ways I could never have imagined. Chapter 3. The Journey Begins. The first part of our journey was like a dream. The sun warmed our faces, the wind filled our sails, and the vast blue ocean stretched out before us like a giant, inviting carpet. We sailed south along the western coast of Africa, the land slowly changing from the familiar green hills of Portugal to a hot, dry coastline with sandy beaches and rocky cliffs. Every day was a new adventure. We saw flying fish skimming the waves like silver arrows, playful dolphins jumping out of the water, and enormous whales spouting water high into the air. At night, the sky exploded with millions of stars, constellations we had never seen before guiding our way. Life on board the ship followed a steady rhythm. The sailors worked in shifts, keeping a watchful eye on the sails, steering the ship and mending any rips in the canvas. We had a cook who prepared simple meals of fish, bread, beans, and dried fruit. Water was a precious resource, and we rationed it carefully. As captain, I had a bigger responsibility. I charted our course using maps and a compass, making sure we stayed on track. I also had to make decisions about food and water rations, keep the crew disciplined, and boost their morale when things got tough. But the dreamlike feeling didn't last forever. Soon, we started facing the first challenges of our long journey. The weather turned unpredictable. One minute the sea was calm and gentle. The next minute it would turn rough with strong winds and towering waves. The ship would rock violently, creaking and groaning like a giant in pain. Sometimes, waves crashed over the deck, soaking us to the bone and making the ship lurch dangerously. The sailors, even the most experienced ones, started to get seasick. They felt dizzy, nauseous, and couldn't keep any food down. The constant rocking and rolling of the ship made it hard to sleep, and the salty air irritated our throats and eyes. Our supplies started to dwindle too. We had planned for a long journey, but the rough weather made it difficult to catch fish, and sometimes the wind wouldn't blow in the right direction, slowing us down. We had to ration our food and water even more, making everyone grumpy and worried. Another big challenge was the unknown. We were sailing along a coastline that no European had ever explored before. We didn't know what to expect around every corner: friendly people, dangerous pirates, or hidden reefs that could tear our ships apart. Despite these difficulties, I never lost hope. I encouraged my crew, reminding them of the glory and riches that awaited us in India. I used my knowledge of the stars and the sea to navigate us through the storms and find calm waters. We even made some interesting discoveries along the way. We landed on a few small islands, some deserted, some inhabited by people who had never seen Europeans before. We traded some of our supplies for fresh fruit and vegetables, which boosted our spirits and helped to fight off scurvy, a disease caused by a lack of vitamin C. These encounters also taught us valuable lessons about different cultures and languages. We learned a few basic words in the languages of the people we met, which helped us communicate and avoid misunderstandings. Weeks turned into months. The African coastline became more rugged, with towering cliffs and dense forests pushing down to the water's edge. We faced more storms, more rough seas, and more worries about running out of food and water. But slowly, a spirit of determination started to grow among the crew. We were in this together, facing challenges that would make us stronger and more skilled sailors. We learned to rely on each other, to work as a team, and to never give up hope. We were on a mission, and we were determined to see it through, no matter what obstacles came our way. As we sailed further south, the weather started to change again. The air grew warmer, the skies became clearer, and the stars seemed to shine brighter. We knew we were approaching a turning point in our journey. We were about to enter uncharted territory, sailing into the unknown waters beyond the southern tip of Africa. The question was, What would we find there? Chapter 4. Down the coast of Africa. The turning point in our journey arrived sooner than expected. After weeks of sailing south along the African coast, the weather took a dramatic shift. The cool, refreshing breezes we had grown accustomed to were replaced by hot, humid air that hung heavy in the sky. The once clear blue ocean turned a murky green, and the horizon seemed to shimmer and waver in the heat. We were entering uncharted territory, sailing into the unknown waters beyond the southern tip of Africa. This was a place no European explorer had ever been before. We didn't know what to expect: friendly currents that would guide us on our way, or dangerous storms that could threaten our very survival. The crew, despite their newfound resilience, became nervous. Some worried about running out of food and water in this vast, unknown sea. Others feared the stories they had heard about monstrous sea creatures guarding the southern tip of Africa. These tales, whispered around campfires for generations, spoke of giant krakens with tentacles that could crush ships and whirlpools that could swallow them whole. Despite the fear and uncertainty, I held firm. I knew that turning back was not an option. We had come too far, and the King of Portugal was counting on us to find a sea route to India. I used my knowledge of the stars and the compass to navigate through the unfamiliar waters. I encouraged my crew, reminding them of the glory and riches that awaited us in India. The days that followed were a test of our courage and resilience. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning the deck of the ship into a scorching platform. The lack of wind made the sails billow limply, slowing our progress. We rationed our water even more strictly, allowing ourselves only a few sips a day. The food situation was no better. We were forced to eat dried fish, which tasted like salty leather, and hard biscuits that were as tough as rocks. One day, a lookout shouted excitedly from the crow's nest, a small platform high on the mast that gave a clear view of the surroundings. "Land ho!" he cried. Hope surged through the crew. Finally, a break in the monotony of the endless sea. We steered our ships towards the land, hearts pounding with anticipation. As we got closer, we realized it was a small, rocky island, barren and almost devoid of life. We anchored our ships and sent a small group ashore to explore. They found nothing but a few scraggly bushes and some strange-looking birds with bright feathers. Disappointed but not defeated, we continued our journey. A few days later, we encountered another challenge: hostile natives. We spotted a group of canoes approaching our ships, each carrying several men armed with spears and shields. We didn't know their intentions, so we raised our weapons in defense. As the canoes got closer, we could see the fierce expressions on the men's faces. They shouted something in a language we couldn't understand, and a few arrows whizzed past our heads. A tense standoff ensued. We didn't want to fight, but we were also determined to defend ourselves. Luckily, one of our crew members, a young man named João Fernandes, remembered learning a few words of a language spoken along the African coast from previous voyages. He called out to the natives in a friendly voice, offering them some of our meager supplies in exchange for peace. To our relief, the natives seemed to understand. They lowered their weapons and cautiously approached our ship. We traded some of our food and water for fresh fruit and vegetables, which was a welcome change from our usual fare. This encounter, although tense at first, taught us a valuable lesson. Communication and trade could be powerful tools to overcome fear and build bridges between different cultures. As we continued sailing south, the coastline became more dramatic. Towering cliffs rose from the water's edge, their peaks shrouded in mist. The sea became rougher, with strong currents and unpredictable waves that tossed our ships around like toys. We had to be extra careful to avoid being smashed against the rocks or capsized by the waves. One particularly stormy night, the wind howled like a banshee, tearing at our sails and threatening to rip the masts right out of the ships. The rain poured down in sheets, reducing visibility to almost zero. The waves rose to a terrifying height, crashing over the deck and soaking us to the bone. We fought desperately to keep the ships under control, our muscles screaming in protest. It was a night of pure terror, but somehow we managed to survive. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a calm sea and a crew that was shaken but not broken. This near-death experience further strengthened our bond. We had faced death together and emerged victorious. It filled us with a renewed sense of determination to overcome any obstacle that lay ahead. Chapter 5. The Cape of Good Hope. Days turned into weeks as we sailed along the ever-changing African coast. The land became even more dramatic, with jagged cliffs that seemed to pierce the sky and long, sandy beaches pounded by relentless waves. The air grew cooler again, and the sea turned a deep, inky blue. We knew we were nearing the southern tip of Africa, a place both feared and revered by sailors, the Cape of Storms. For centuries, sailors had whispered tales of this treacherous cape. It was said to be a place where violent storms raged constantly, where monstrous sea creatures lurked in the depths, and where currents strong enough to drag ships under the water swirled around the rocky headland. Many explorers who dared to venture south along the African coast had never returned, their ships lost to the fury of the Cape of Storms. Fear and apprehension hung heavy in the air as we approached this legendary landmark. The crew, despite their newfound resilience, became uneasy. Some muttered prayers, others tightened their grips on their weapons, and all eyes scanned the horizon for any sign of the approaching danger. One morning, a lookout shouted from the crow's nest, his voice trembling with excitement. "Land ahoy!" he cried. But this wasn't a joyous cry like the one that greeted the sight of the small, barren island. This was a tense announcement, a confirmation of our worst fears. We had reached the Cape of Storms. As we sailed closer, the wind picked up, whipping the sea into a frenzy. Dark clouds gathered overhead, casting long shadows on the water. Lightning flashed, illuminating the imposing silhouette of the cape for a brief moment. It was a sight both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The towering cliffs of black rock seemed to reach out towards us like giant claws, ready to snatch our ships and drag them to their watery graves. The storm that followed was the worst we had ever encountered. Huge waves rose like mountains, threatening to engulf our ships. The wind howled with a deafening roar, tearing at the sails and threatening to rip the masts from their sockets. Rain lashed down in sheets, making it impossible to see more than a few feet in front of you. For days, we were at the mercy of the storm. Our ships were tossed like corks in a bathtub, the constant creaking and groaning of the wood sending shivers down our spines. We fought tirelessly to keep the ships afloat, pumping water out of the holds, adjusting the sails to catch the wind just enough to avoid being capsized. Sleep was a luxury we couldn't afford. Every moment required our full focus, our complete dedication to staying alive. Despite the fear and exhaustion, The crew never gave up. We encouraged each other, shared stories to keep our spirits high, and most importantly, followed my instructions to the letter. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the storm began to subside. The wind gradually died down, the waves grew smaller, and a sliver of blue peeked through the dark clouds. We had survived the Cape of Storms. Relief washed over us like a warm wave, leaving us weak but exhilarated. As the sun peeked through the clouds, bathing the scene in a golden glow, we saw the Cape of Storms in a new light. It was still a formidable sight, but the fear had been replaced with a sense of accomplishment. We had conquered this legendary landmark, proving that with courage, skill, and a bit of luck, even the most dangerous places could be overcome. But there was a more important realization that dawned on us. The Cape of Storms wasn't just a place of fear. It was a turning point in our journey. We had rounded the southern tip of Africa, a feat that many had deemed impossible. This meant that a clear route to the east, and hopefully to India, was now open to us. The journey had been long and arduous, filled with challenges and dangers. But we had persevered. We had faced our fears, learned to work together as a team, and discovered a strength within ourselves that we never knew we possessed. Now, with renewed hope and a spirit of adventure, we set sail eastward, into the vast unknown waters beyond the Cape of Good Hope. Chapter 6. Land Ho. Weeks turned into months as we sailed eastwards, leaving the fearsome Cape of Good Hope behind. The sun beat down on our backs, the wind filled our sails, and the vast blue ocean stretched out endlessly before us. The crew, still shaken by the ordeal at the Cape of Storms, slowly regained their confidence. The days settled into a comfortable rhythm. We kept watch for land, studied the stars at night, and mended any rips in the sails. The food situation remained challenging, but we supplemented our rations with fish we caught using lines and nets. One particularly clear day, a lookout shouted the words that sent a jolt of excitement through the crew, "Land ho!" We rushed to the deck, squinting towards the horizon where a faint outline of land emerged from the blue haze. Relief and anticipation filled the air. After months at sea, the sight of land was like a beacon of hope. As we drew closer, we could see that the land was green and lush, with tall palm trees swaying in the breeze. White sand beaches stretched along the coastline, and in the distance, we could see the faint outline of buildings nestled amongst the trees. This was our first glimpse of the east coast of Africa, a land far different from the rugged coastline we had left behind. We didn't know exactly where we were, but the excitement of finally reaching land after such a long journey was overwhelming. We anchored our ships offshore and sent a small boat with a few crew members, including myself, to explore. We approached the beach cautiously, unsure of what awaited us. As we stepped onto the warm sand, a group of people emerged from the trees. They were tall and slender, with dark skin and short, curly hair. They wore colorful clothing made of light fabric and carried long spears in their hands. We didn't understand their language, and they didn't understand ours. This could have been a tense situation, but luckily, one of our crew members, João Fernandez, who had picked up some words from previous voyages, stepped forward. Using a combination of gestures and the few words he knew, he tried to explain who we were and why we were there. To our surprise, the people seemed friendly. They smiled and offered us some strange-looking fruit that tasted sweet and juicy. We, in turn, shared some of our hard biscuits and dried fish. Communication remained a challenge, but it was clear that these people were curious about us. They examined our clothes, weapons, and ships with fascination. We, in turn, were equally curious about them. We learned that they lived in small villages along the coast and farmed the land for food. They also fished and hunted for animals in the forest. Despite the language barrier, we managed to establish a basic level of communication. We traded some of our goods, cloth, tools, and trinkets for fresh fruit, vegetables, and even some chickens. This first contact with the people of East Africa was a positive experience. It showed us that different cultures, despite not speaking the same language, could find ways to interact peacefully and even benefit from trade. We spent a few days in this friendly village, resting and replenishing our supplies. We learned some basic words in their language, which would be helpful in future encounters. More importantly, we gained valuable information about the coastline ahead and the possibility of finding a trade route to India. However, our stay wasn't entirely peaceful. Some of the locals, suspicious of our intentions, tried to steal from our ships. We had to be careful and keep a watchful eye on our belongings. This experience served as a reminder that not everyone we might encounter would be friendly. We needed to be cautious and prepared for anything. Eventually, it was time to move on. We said our goodbyes to the villagers, weighed anchor, and set sail once again. As we left the familiar coast behind, we knew our journey to India was far from over. There were more lands to explore, more cultures to encounter, and most importantly, a sea route to India to discover. The days that followed were filled with a renewed sense of purpose. We had made significant progress, and the dream of reaching India seemed more achievable than ever before. We had faced challenges, learned valuable lessons, and even made new friends along the way. The vastness of the ocean continued to stretch out before us, but it no longer felt like an endless barrier. We were explorers, pioneers charting a new course. We had the courage, the skill, and the determination to see our mission through, no matter what obstacles lay ahead. Chapter 7. India at Last. Months melted into each other like the endless blue horizon. We sailed north along the East African coast, making stops at various ports to replenish supplies and learn more about the region. The scorching sun beat down mercilessly, turning the deck of our ship into a hot plate. We battled strong currents, sudden squalls, and the ever-present threat of running out of food and water. Despite the challenges, the crew remained optimistic. We had tasted success, making contact with friendly natives and learning valuable information about the coastline. The dream of reaching India and finding a sea route for Portugal fueled our determination. One day, a lookout shouted excitedly from the crow's nest, "Land ho!" This time, however, the cry held a different meaning. It wasn't just the relief of seeing land after weeks at sea, but the possibility that this might be our final stop before reaching India. Our hearts pounded with anticipation as we steered our ships towards the land. The coastline looked different from anything we had seen before. Lush green forests stretched as far as the eye could see, dotted with strange-looking buildings that resembled giant white birds. As we approached, we saw a bustling harbor filled with colorful boats and bustling with activity. Merchants in loose white clothing scurried to and fro, carrying exotic goods on their shoulders. The air was filled with the aroma of unfamiliar spices, a scent that promised riches and success. This was Calicut, a major trading port on the Malabar coast of India. We had finally reached our destination after a grueling journey that lasted over 2 years. The emotions on board were a mix of relief, exhaustion, and pure joy. We anchored our ships and sent a small delegation, including myself, to meet the local ruler, the Zamarin. We were dressed in our finest clothes, carrying gifts of gold, cloth, and other precious items from Portugal. Our arrival created a stir. People had never seen men like us before, pale-skinned with strange clothes and unusual weapons. We were ushered into a grand palace, adorned with intricate carvings and colorful tapestries. The Zamarin, a powerful man with a long beard and a jeweled turban, received us with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. We bowed low and presented our gifts, explaining through an interpreter, a kind merchant who spoke some Arabic, a language some of our crew knew, that we were peaceful explorers seeking trade with India. The Zamarin listened intently to our translator. He seemed interested in our goods, especially the gold, but hesitant about establishing trade relations with us. He already had well-established trade routes with other countries and may have worried about competition. The initial negotiations were slow and frustrating. We faced several challenges. The language barrier made communication difficult, and some local officials, influenced by powerful spice merchants who feared losing their profits, were against any new trade partnerships. Despite the setbacks, we persevered. We offered the Zamarin even more valuable gifts and promised him a share of the profits from any trade deals. Slowly, his attitude started to change. He saw the potential benefits of trade with Portugal, a new source of wealth and exotic goods for his kingdom. Finally, after weeks of negotiations, we secured a trade agreement. This was a significant victory. We had established the first sea route to India, opening up a new chapter in trade and exploration for Portugal. However, our celebration was short-lived. Some local merchants, unhappy with the deal, spread rumors about us and incited the people against us. They accused us of being spies or pirates, a threat to their way of life. The situation became tense. We faced hostility from some locals and even a few attacks on our ships. We realized that staying in Calicut for too long could be dangerous. We had achieved our main goal, but it was time to leave before things escalated further. With a heavy heart, we loaded our ships with spices, pepper, cinnamon, ginger, cloves, the treasures we had risked everything for. We said our goodbyes to the Zamarin, hoping that despite the initial difficulties, our trade agreement would eventually benefit both Portugal and India. As we set sail from Calicut harbor, leaving the bustling city behind, a wave of mixed emotions washed over me. We were finally on our way home, laden with riches and the knowledge of a new world. The journey had been long and arduous, filled with challenges and dangers. But we had persevered, proving that with courage, determination, and a bit of luck, even the impossible could be achieved. The long journey back to Portugal awaited us, but the spirit on board was high. We were heroes returning home, pioneers who had opened a new chapter in history. We carried within us the stories of new lands, cultures, and the promise of a prosperous future for. Chapter 8. Back to Portugal. The journey back to Portugal felt different from our outward voyage. We were no longer wide-eyed explorers venturing into the unknown. We were seasoned sailors, returning home with a story to tell and treasures unlike any seen before in Europe. The excitement on board was palpable. The crew, despite the hardships they had endured, buzzed with anticipation of seeing their families and friends again. The hold of our ship, once filled with basic supplies, was now a treasure trove. We carried bags overflowing with exotic spices, black peppercorns, fragrant cinnamon sticks, ginger root that looked like gnarled fingers, and cloves that emitted a pungent aroma. These spices were more than just food flavorings. They were valuable commodities that would fetch a high price in Europe. Our journey wasn't without its challenges. The weather remained unpredictable, with storms brewing suddenly and disrupting our course. We also faced pirates who roamed the seas, preying on unsuspecting ships, but our crew, battle-hardened by their experiences, met these challenges with skill and bravery. Months passed, and the familiar outline of the Portuguese coast finally appeared on the horizon. A cheer erupted from the crew, a sound of pure joy and relief. We had traveled for over 2 years, facing countless dangers and overcoming seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Now, we were finally returning home. As we entered the Lisbon harbor, the sight that greeted us was overwhelming. Hundreds of people lined the docks, their faces filled with excitement and curiosity. News of our voyage had reached Portugal months ago, and everyone was eager to see the returning heroes and the exotic treasures they brought. King Manuel himself was present, waiting to receive us. As we stepped onto the dock, he greeted me warmly, a broad smile on his face. "Vasco," he boomed, his voice filled with pride, "you have done Portugal a great service. You have found a sea route to India, opening up a new era of trade and prosperity for our kingdom." I bowed low and replied, "Your Majesty, it was an honor to serve you." The success of this voyage belongs to the brave crew who faced every challenge with courage and determination. The king then turned to the crowd and addressed them in a loud, clear voice. He spoke of our long and arduous journey, the dangers we faced, and the incredible achievement of finding a sea route to India. He praised the crew for their bravery and skill, and declared me a national hero. The cheers of the crowd were deafening. We were paraded through the streets of Lisbon, showered with flowers and praise. People marveled at the spices we brought back, their eyes wide with wonder as they sniffed the unfamiliar aromas. News of our voyage spread throughout Europe like wildfire. We became celebrities, our names whispered in taverns and palaces alike. The success of our mission not only brought wealth and prestige to Portugal, but it also revolutionized the spice trade. Before our journey, spices were incredibly expensive, only affordable by the very wealthy. Now, with a direct sea route to India, spices became more accessible, adding flavor and variety to European cuisine. My life changed dramatically. I was showered with riches and honors. The king bestowed upon me the title of Dom, a mark of great respect. I became a wealthy man, able to live comfortably and enjoy the fruits of my labor. But more importantly, I gained something far more valuable: respect and admiration. I became an inspiration for future explorers, a symbol of courage, perseverance, and the power of human ambition. My journey to India had not only opened a new trade route, but it had also opened a door to a new world, a world of exploration and discovery. The story of our voyage served as a beacon, encouraging others to venture beyond the known, to explore the vast oceans and uncharted territories. It marked the beginning of a new age of exploration, an age where Europeans would sail to the farthest corners of the globe, forever changing the course of history. However, Despite the celebrations and newfound fame, a part of me remained restless. The vast ocean still held a powerful allure. I knew that my journey to India was just the beginning. There were more lands to explore, more secrets to uncover, and perhaps, one day, I would set sail once again, venturing into the unknown in search of new adventures.